some of them are coming from out of region and some are without military insignia. I have personally met with journalists who were beaten, arbitrarily detained, who were tortured, whose equipment has been either destroyed or confiscated. Now, let me also mention that it's particularly disturbing to see that there are some persons who are unaccounted for, such as Mr. Andrei Shekun, Ms. Anatoly Kowalski and his son Sergei Kowalski, Mr. Mikhail Vdovchenko and Mr. Tanev. It is of utmost importance to resolve their whereabouts as soon as possible. Speaking of the protection of minorities in Crimea, the Tatar situation is particularly vulnerable, and when talking either to displaced people from Tatar community whom I met in Lvov, or the leaders of the Tatar community, it is quite clear that they are afraid of what future brings for them. Now, let me conclude. To address chronic human rights violation, there is a need for urgent reform of security sector and justice system. Envisaged lustration has to be in line with best practices, respecting fully human rights. There is a need for improvement of anti-corruption legislation and appropriate measures to be taken. And of course that United Nations stand ready to support authorities in conducting adequate reforms. As far as violations that are protest related are concerned, there has to be accountability for crimes committed during protests. Individualization of guilt prevents collective retaliation. Now let me come now to the answers to current challenges. To diffuse tensions, it is essential to have a broad participation of minorities, including, of course, Russian minorities, on new legislation regulating the use of minority languages. There should be quite clear sign of readiness on an open dialogue on decentralization issues. Ukraine should be quite clear of intention to go for an inclusive political system, enabling broad participation of various groups of society in political decision making. Any form of hate speech should be prevented, of course, without curbing freedom of expression. And now, finally, and most importantly, each instance of human rights violation must be impartially investigated and reported on. It prevents any, on one hand side, cover-up, but also on blowing them out of proportion for propaganda and manipulation purposes. It can help diffuse current tensions. When talking to civil society in all parts of the country, there was a request for United Nations to provide for adequate UN human rights monitoring. I am happy to say that yesterday, Prime Minister has asked Secretary General to provide for such a monitoring. UN decided to swiftly respond to this request. I would like to ask Armen Harutunian to join me. Armen is going to be ahead of Human Rights United Nations monitoring mission in Ukraine, with a mandate to investigate human rights violations and to publicly report on them. His team will be arriving during the course of next week and will start to operate immediately. Thank you very much, and I stand ready for your questions.
Thank you very much, Your Excellence. Вельмишановні панове журналісти, зараз ви маєте можливість поставити декілька запитань пану Шимоновичу. Я прошу вас представлятись і представляти видання, яке ви представляєте. Прошу.
Just wait a moment until I hear what you say.
Mirjana Hrg, Al Jazeera Balkans. Ja ću iskoristiti priliku postaviti pitanje na našem jeziku, ako dopuštate. Najdelikatnije vezano za snajpersku pucnjavu, rekli ste da je delikatno. Možete li mi reći, očekujete li da ćemo ikada doznati tko je to učinio?
Did others understand what we talk about? Okay. I'll do it later. Okay. So the question requires answer in the same language. I'll deal with it later. Please, other questions.
Associated Press, Maria Danilova. The Russian Foreign Ministry just issued a statement a couple of hours ago saying that the events in Donetsk are alarming, and that Russia reserves the right to protect Russian citizens, compatriots, and also citizens of Ukraine. In the course of your mission, did you find evidence of the need to protect Russian speakers, Russians, and just Ukrainians in the east and south? Thank you.
To protect in sense of human rights protection, of course, but no sign of the human rights violations of such a proportion, of such widespread intensity that would require any military measures. What we find essential is that we do not just fly here, stay a week, and say something on allegations about rights of the Russian minority and share our first impressions. We want to be present here in next couple of months. We want to have capacity to investigate, impartially investigate, and report on those violations. I believe that the United Nations can be considered impartial by all actors, and that it can help diffuse tensions. Again, to prevent any sort of cover-ups, to be fully transparent, but also to prevent overblowing and any sort of potential manipulation with the threats to human rights.
Василь Короткий, Укрінформ. Як довго ви перебуватимете в Україні і чи намагатиметесь ви ще раз потрапити до окупованого Криму?
I, as you know, asked to be received in Crimea, and I was denied. As a follow-up to that, I asked to talk to Mr. Aksionov on phone. I didn't get a call back. Will I try to get back to Crimea? The answer is yes. So far, I was asked by Secretary General to extend my stay until Tuesday. I was supposed to depart tomorrow. However, I will be staying until Tuesday. It is a result of concern of Secretary General of the current escalation in the country.
Večernji list, Croatian daily newspaper. Do you think that we can compare our situation in Crimea with Kosovo, and if yes, in which sense? And the other question, if I may, talking to people in eastern Ukraine, do you have any feeling that they're ready to take weapons, and is it a feeling the same like in Crimea, maybe to follow their steps? Thank you.
I still hope that there will be no further bloodshed in Ukraine. I hope that through also a part of political action and mediation, that there is a chance to implement human rights focused measures that can help de-escalate tensions, including human rights monitoring and public reporting. I hope that parallels between Kosovo and Crimea will not be necessary. If we take into account what was the price of human lives in Kosovo, that there were many lives first taken and then again lost during the NATO intervention. So let us get away from this parallel and work for peace.
Чи ще питання? Дуже дякую. Дуже дякую. Шановне панство, якщо будуть у вас запитання, якщо ви хочете поставити запитання ще окремо після того, як ми закінчимо зараз прес-конференцію, будь ласка, підходьте до мене. Також я буду розповсюджувати в електронному вигляді стейтмент, який зробив пан Шимонович. Якщо вам потрібен електронний варіант цього стейтменту, будь ласка, підходьте також до мене і ми обміняємось електронними адресами. Я вам дуже дякую за увагу. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. І ми закінчуємо. Дякую.